Yat A and good morning. My name is Sonia Begay, and I'm an executive staff assistant with the Navajo Nation Office of the President and Vice President. I welcome you and thank you for tuning in to today's presentation, Human Trafficking 101, and a message to our Dine youth. In honor of January being recognized as Human Trafficking Awareness Month by the Navajo Nation, the Office of the First Lady and Second Lady, along with several partners, will host virtual webinars aimed at providing educational sessions these next couple of weeks. Earlier this week, we heard from Restoring Ancestral Winds, which is a nonprofit organization from Utah. Their mission is to support healing in Indigenous communities. Today's session is Human Trafficking 101. We will continue next Wednesday, January 26th. Thomas Aliberti, Assistant United States Attorney and Tribal Liaison for the District of New Mexico, will present Combating Human Trafficking from a Law Enforcement Perspective. On Friday, January 28th, the Navajo Division of Public Safety will provide a virtual self-defense demonstration. From the Office of the First Lady and Second Lady, we continue to be an advocate for healthy families and healthy communities. At the core, our focus is on the home and family, home environments, marriage, parenting, as well as holistic healing and restoring individual and family units with a strong cultural and spiritual foundation. In addition, Office of the First Lady and Second Lady strives to highlight the work of Navajo Nation divisions and programs. It is through these partnerships that we are able to host a variety of virtual events. Visit our website at www.nnoflsl.com or access all this information on our mobile app, which you can download through the Google Play Store or Apple Store. During the month of January, we encourage everyone to wear blue, which is an internationally recognized color to end human trafficking. At this time, I would like to introduce a very bright young man who is a current student at Vanguard University in Southern California. He is currently in his senior year and is on track to graduate with an undergraduate degree in communications with an emphasis in technology and emerging media. Matthew Holgate, originally from Navajo Mountain, Arizona. He is affiliated with Vanguard University's Global Center for Women and Justice and is the student body president. Mr. Holgate will present on the topic, Human Trafficking 101, and will share a message with our youth. Mr. Holgate?
Okay, good morning, everybody. Yat ebene she'eya. Matthew Holgate inishia. Kizatlan nishlet dot kodachini bashes chin na kaidine and dashache. Dog Kizatlan and dashanella. Ado natsis on de denasha. Well, again, good morning, everybody. My name is Matthew Holgate. I am from Navajo Mountain, Arizona side. I know there's Utah side and Arizona, so my grandma's house is in the Arizona side. But yeah, so just a little bit about me and why we're here today. So I am actually a student. I'm 21 years old, a student at Vanguard University of Southern California. And a part of my studies there is a lot of different things. I came out here to study film, and I actually switched my major in the middle of my freshman year, and I switched to communication. Doing communication work through emerging media and technology is where my emphasis lies in. And I just found a really big tie to just that whole field of just technology, graphics in different areas. So I really, really love it. But also a part of my education there that I was able to expand is in a couple of different minors. So I'm minoring in religion, minoring in journalism and digital media. And then my last minor and professional certificate is a program in anti-human trafficking. So it's really unique that my university offered that. And it's always been something that I wanted to learn more about, and especially in high school, learning about different human trafficking cases that were happening in my community in different places on the Navajo Nation. and then hearing more about human trafficking in rural tribal nations as well. So that's what we're here to talk about today, is understanding human trafficking. And I want to say a big thank you to the people who invited me here today, the Office of the First Lady and the Second Lady of the Navajo Nation. I really support the initiatives that they're taking to help people like you who are watching understand what human trafficking is. It can be a very confusing and very unsettling topic, but it's important that you know what this is for us to fight it, for us to make sure that human trafficking doesn't exist anymore, especially in our on our nations, our communities. We want to be very diligent about really addressing the issue head on. And I just want to say thank you to the First Lady and Second Lady for really diving deeper into this as we're going through January, which is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. So we're doing a lot of different things. Many of you probably were on the presentation this past Wednesday. We have a couple more next week. So there is an itinerary out there floating around somewhere on social media with the other events that will be taking place. So I want to say a big ahead to our government leaders and the staff of the First Lady and Second Lady. I also wanted to say thank you to Taisha Woods, who is kind of organizing some of these things and really behind the scenes of a lot of it. So I just want to say thank you for considering me to even be presenting today. This is a topic that I really have been trying to understand and learn more. So I'm a student, you're a student, and it's going to be great. So let's dive into this. The first part I wanted to talk about is what do you picture when you hear human trafficking? So I want you to take a second really quick to think of some images of that you see when someone says human trafficking. Maybe you're thinking of some of these images. So when I Googled human trafficking, this is kind of the images that I found. This is some of the images that popped up. You can see, identify in these visuals, obviously chains, being held captive, being a hostage. But the reality is that most human trafficking victims are not bound by chains. They're not in basements. And this information can sometimes be more harmful to you as a student, as a listener, than it is helpful. So these images are actually not helpful at all, because a lot of the times, this is not what human trafficking looks like. And I wanted to show you these visuals really quick to just understand what human trafficking is. For me as a student, it's better to identify what human trafficking is not, so that we can better understand what human trafficking is, and we can label different things about human trafficking and further explain what it actually is. And this is what I want us to talk about today, is basic knowledge of human trafficking on a more global perspective. And I wish I had the data and knowledge to educate you all about what human trafficking is happening and what it looks like here on the Navajo Nation. But I don't have access to those resources currently. So I will give you what I have learned as a student and talking about kind of what human trafficking looks like globally and basic understanding of this. So jumping in, I kind of wanted to take a step back and talk about modern slavery. So I wanted to put it in the context of the more global picture of human trafficking. Human trafficking in a different form of expression is essentially slavery. So it's a modern expression of slavery. Slavery is nothing new to us. We've learned about slavery if you went to school. We learned about it in middle school, high school, and then sometimes even younger than that, we teach our children about slavery and what slavery looked like, because this is nothing new. So modern day slavery, like I said, is nothing new today, the concept of it. But a couple of things have changed drastically in the past couple of decades that we've been able to study what slavery is. And a part of those things that have changed is the number of slaves. So I want you to remember that 40.3 million people is the kind of estimated number from the Global Slavery Index of how many people are enslaved or involved in human trafficking today. So take a step back and just Let that sink in. 40.3 million people are estimated to be in slavery today, which is more people and more slaves than any point of our human history. So that's really, really important to know. 40.3 million people is larger than the country of Canada's population. It's larger than California's population as well, which is where I currently reside, which is really hard to understand because there's so much traffic here and a lot of different things that just relate to a big population and big populations of people. So I want you to put that into perspective, that the number of slaves has changed drastically. And part of that is just because there have been more and more, there's been a growth of population. So there are a lot more people than there are in the 1800s. So going into our next one is the cost of slaves is different. So to kind of put this into perspective, again, today's slaves are cheap. For Kevin Bales points out that during the height of the transatlantic slave trade in 1840, the average field worker cost about $40,000 in today's money. Today, slavery is cheaper than $40,000, and it's just crazy to think that people can be sold in sexual exploitation for just essential needs, for firewood, for food, for water, different things like that. It doesn't even have to be monetarily, but there is a demand for it as well. And the third part of this, what's new, is the globalization. Globalization is really what connects us. It's what connects the world together. And really it's changed because now we have the internet, we have airplanes and different amenities like that that weren't there in past slavery. So today in modern slavery, we talk about globalization, and we have to acknowledge that there are different avenues to getting slaves and for being involved in human trafficking. We have cell phones, we have social media, we have Skype and different things like that, different amenities that really emphasize how our world is just advancing in technology today. This is my field of expertise in emerging media and technology, and slavery and human trafficking does happen, especially online and on social media. And those are really big areas that we need to be aware of. And the fourth one, so I know, going back and talking about the other three that I just mentioned are very negative, but the last thing that I want to talk about, and a very good thing actually, is that slaves are no longer legal anywhere. Around the world, we have UN slavery laws, and each country has laws that actually do not legalize slavery. So slavery is not legal around the world, but yet it persists everywhere due to just the lack of the country corruption and lack of law enforcement, law enforcing, and different other reasons. Even here in the United States, we have good laws and trained law enforcement, but finding victims is still difficult, especially in labor trafficking. So though it isn't legal around the world, it's still hard to kind of get everybody on board in talking about human trafficking. So that's more of the global context. And I wanted to, if you're more of like a definition person, if you feel more comfortable hearing something just stated, I'll give you the definition of what the Department of Justice has for their definition of human trafficking. So the human trafficking is a crime that involves exploiting a person for labor, services, or commercial sex. So there's different parts to this that I want us to kind of break down and talk about later in this presentation. But overall, I want you to know that a big chunk of human trafficking is exploitation. And there's exploitation through force, fraud, or coercion. And then we have two main specific fields of trafficking, which is labor services and commercial sex exploitation. So some things to remember as we're getting deeper into this. This is from the Global Slavery Index, is that there are 40.3 victims of human trafficking today. 86% is forced labor, 22% is sexual exploitation, and 10% is state-imposed forced labor. So breaking these down, I know this is kind of probably like a shock for many of you if you've just heard or seen human trafficking talked about, but I want to really emphasize that actually 68% of all human trafficking is forced labor today. So, and 22% is sexual exploitation. A lot of times we have these notions that those are flipped, and we think that sexual exploitation and sex trafficking is is happening a lot more than labor trafficking, but that's just not the case. And I wanted to really emphasize that because a part of forced labor, it's the acts that you do in forced labor can be legal. It's not illegal to wash dishes. It's not illegal to wipe tables in a restaurant or to mop, sweep a floor. It's not illegal to do those things, but it is illegal to sell sex, and it is illegal to get monetarily funds through providing sex, commercial sex as well. So that's kind of where the flip happens. And we always tend to think that sex trafficking is happening a lot more. But it's just not the case, because we see sex trafficking emphasized in media. We see it happening and we know when it's happening. And it's just a lot more visualized because it's illegal, whereas forced labor is not, some acts of forced labor are not legal. So keeping those in mind, I wanted to dive into the AMP model. So the AMP model is a model that exists to kind of do the checklists of what can be involved in human trafficking. So me as a student, I love checklists. If you look at any of my notepads or anything, I have like checklists for everything that I'm doing, like my homework for the week or whatever it is. But this AMP model can be used as a checklist for you to identify what human trafficking is. So there are three parts to the AMP model, or the AMP model, is action, means, and purpose. So actions is when a victim is induced, if they're recruited, if they're harbored or transported. And when I say transported, this can happen in some cases, but you do not need to be migrated or transported from a state to state, country to country to be a victim of trafficking. It can provide or obtains to do so in all these areas of action. And then the means for this is force, fraud, or coercion. So we talked about the definition earlier of what exploitation is, and exploitation happens through force, fraud, or coercion. So force is just being forced to do it because you're being threatened. You're in a situation where it's just not safe, and you're actually being forced to provide commercial sex or labor services. And fraud is the promise of a job, like tricking somebody into doing something. And then coercion, of course, is this can take many forms, but most seen in the United States, it starts as a romantic relationship and then turns into an abusive and exploitive relationship. It can look like debts, debt bondage. When they come to the US, they are told to, work off their debts in different areas. So that's something to also keep in mind for coercion. And then the purpose, of course, is the sexual commercial exploitation, sex trafficking, or labor services, which is referred to as labor trafficking. So just knowing this model too will just really help you understand in certain cases what is sex trafficking, what is labor trafficking, and human trafficking overall. So to put into just use, knowing the actions can really be a big part of what is happening in trafficking. And then the means, of course, force, fraud, or coercion. And then I wanted to just make sure that everybody is very clear when it comes to minors and when it comes to children under the age of 18, the force, fraud, or coercion means part is actually not required. So it is illegal to have sex with children. It is illegal to use them as sexual being objects, and so there is no need to provide force, fraud, or coercion there. And even for labor trafficking, there are labor laws. This is why we have labor laws, so that we don't have to have a means for children who are being trafficked, because so we don't need to have the means for labor trafficking due to child labor laws, and that's why those are in place. Going a little bit further into the purpose of human trafficking, is understanding the types of trafficking that are happening. So just to put into perspective, if you don't know any of these things, I want you to be aware of them. So for sexual exploitation and forced labor, there are different components and different things that are happening to people around the world. So sexual exploitation, we see prostitution, pornography, bride trafficking, massage parlors, brothels, escort services, phone sex lines, internet dating, exotic dancing, and stripping. And now we even have sugar dating and different things like that that are happening as a result of sexual exploitation. And then in the forced labor column, we see domestic service, domestic work, childcare, nursing homes, debt bondage, state imposed manual labor, agricultural work, factory, sweatshop, construction, mining, landscaping, restaurants, nail salons, hotels, door to door. So there is a lot more room for doing things and a lot more types of trafficking that happen in forced labor that I really want you to be aware of, that it doesn't have to be just domestic servicing. It doesn't have to just be working for somebody and being held captive in a way like that, but it can happen in restaurants. It happens in stores, that it happens in even retail stores, you know, that there are some cases of that happening around in our border towns especially. And then in the child trafficking column, we have any sexual exploitation of a minor, child marriages, illegal adoptions, labor, including begging, domestic servitude, sweatshops, restaurants, and then child soldiers. So these are the different types of trafficking that we are able to see and that are most recent in statistics that show us what human trafficking is happening globally. So if you haven't heard any of these or if you have any questions, I'll have my contact information at the end of this and we can talk and dive deeper of more, because I want you to be aware of this. And I want you to be aware that our children, your siblings, brothers, sisters are really could know about these things and they don't actually know that these are harmful things to them just because of the lack of education. So we need to understand the different types of trafficking that are also happening globally. So risk factors. When I talk about risk factors, I just want to talk about how some of these different categories here are not qualifications to be a victim of human trafficking, but these are just seen in studies of um, what areas that we have to be most ready for. And when I learned about risk factors as a young student in high school, I was able to, again, you know, check off different areas where I, you know, growing up in a border town in Flagstaff with a lot of Navajo friends and, you know, going back home, seeing my cousins and really understanding the complexities of, you know, just different struggles that different people have out on the Navajo Nation or any tribal reservation, really, any tribal nation. There are a lot of things that we can check off in our communities, you know, poverty, lack of resources, lack of support system, history of prostitution, history of abuse and trauma, our race, different things. And I checked off a lot of them when I thought about risk factors for my own people. And that's when something clicked in me. And I said, you know, this has to be addressed. If these are risk factors, you know, it's probably happening. Trafficking is probably happening in the Navajo Nation. And I need to be sure that everybody is aware. You know, traffickers are very intelligent and they are targeting people. They are targeting people who fall into these risk factors, and they're targeting people who may be vulnerable to a lot of these risk factors, and that's who they're looking for. And as I began to understand it as a way that traffickers are, I guess, targeting individuals or they're targeting people groups, I was a lot more concerned for my community and for, you know, just me and my cousins, my nieces, my nephews, and people who are very close to me is what I really wanted to understand. So even though I say these are risk factors and these are different scenarios, just because you don't fall under one of these things doesn't mean that you cannot potentially be a victim of human trafficking. Trafficking is not immune to anybody, regardless of your race, you know, your socioeconomic status, your support system or anything. Nobody is immune to this, but this just helps us identify different populations that we need to be focusing on to prevent trafficking. Um, yes. And I wanted to kind of, as I'm wrapping up, getting done with the what is human trafficking, this is just a model that we call it you'll hear it sometimes as the 4 Ps of trafficking. And then for me, I work at the Global Center for Women and Justice, and we call it the 5 Ps because we've added the 5th one, which is policy, in our organization. But this is really victim-centered, trauma-informed approach, which helps us identify and figure out how can we address human trafficking in its best form. So we'll talk about the 3 Ps in the center is prevention, protection, and prosecution. Prevention is essentially what we're doing here. You're learning, you're being informed, and you're learning how to identify at-risk people who may be involved in trafficking or maybe a victim of trafficking. And it's just understanding vulnerable populations and targeted populations as well. So this is a great example of prevention, is we're educating the community, we're educating you on how to end human trafficking essentially. Protection is essentially just working with the recovering victims and working towards empowering survivors' personal dignity, survivors who were involved in trafficking. And it's really just to be a support system and teaching survivors how to get their dignity back, how to self-identify again, and how to learn to love themselves. And it's very focused around survivors. Prosecution is more of the law enforcement investigation side, and we're able to learn from law enforcement cases. We're able to hold suspects accountable. We're able to get justice for survivors and victims of trafficking. So those are the 3 main Ps out of the 4. And then lastly, the Global Center's 5th one, which is policy. So policy really is around legislation, governance, and it's being able to voice who we put into office and the people that we vote for, to really understand that policy does change a lot. It changes law enforcement, it changes the funds that we get to do things like this, or to do community outreaches and different things. So that's what we want to talk to you about. So how can you be an ally? Being an ally today is, I have a couple of ones different laid out here, but I just wanted to empower you to be an anti-human trafficking ally, to be an anti-slave abolitionist. So some different ways is calling the hotline if you see anything suspicious, especially in rural communities. Just being able to have those resources, which I have on another slide. And then making ethical purchases. So if you don't know, this little logo down here is the fair trade logo. So if you see it on different foods you're buying or different packaging, that just means that it is fair trade, and it goes through a whole process so that it can make sure that whatever you're consuming, whether it be food, clothes, or something, is being made ethical. So making ethical purchases. Don't watch or buy porn, as a lot of times, we've listed porn as something that can be sexually exploitive, and it can be harmful. It can be, most of the times we see porn used in a way to just show people abuse for victims of victims of human trafficking. So a lot of times you may not know it, but on the other side of the screen in pornography, there is a lot of victims of trafficking which is then produced into pornography. And then watching documentaries on human trafficking. I know podcasting is really big now, And I do a lot of podcasts. I love listening to podcasts and like hearing different people. And I wanted to advertise the Ending Human Trafficking podcast, which is something that the Global Center here at Vanguard, where I'm at, actually does and produces on their own. So if you want to listen to a really good informational podcast, I really recommend Ending Human Trafficking. Even just YouTubing what is human trafficking, getting on some different documentaries. Our school is actually going to be screening a documentary called Boys Documentary, which is about men and boys who have been sexually exploited or have been involved in human trafficking in some way as a victim, and talking about how men are actually can be victims of trafficking as well, and how hard it is to talk about trafficking on a male perspective. So watching documentaries like that is very informative, and then telling others what you've learned today. And if there's anything that you've picked up, anything that you've been able to learn about more what human trafficking is, really, I just wanted to encourage you to go out and tell people, human trafficking doesn't just happen to girls, it happens to boys too. We don't have to just we don't have to focus on different areas that we have to explore what is labor trafficking, what makes it different from sex trafficking and different things, and the 40.3 million people that are being trafficked around the world. Remember those people and think about those people, and you being able to identify, even if it's friends, if you're like a teacher and students in different areas, those are really good starting grounds to have conversation about human trafficking. And it's good for you, if there are any parents watching right now, talk to your kids about this, talk to them about boundaries, and talk to them about having like personal space, and making sure nobody is coming up to them or talking to them, the stranger danger talk, what we used to get a lot. And monitor too, we see a lot of trafficking happening, especially since we went all virtual in different areas of life, school being one of them. Sometimes it's necessary for our students to be online. And sometimes the system fails, and your students can get caught up in looking at things they shouldn't be looking at. So it happens online. Trafficking does happen through a phone, and I just wanted you all to be aware of that. There are different avenues for traffickers to get to our students, to your kids, to your siblings. So just be conscientious and check up on them and make sure they're safe, and make sure that they understand what are, the 4 Ps of human trafficking. What is human trafficking? And then how can they be an ally in these different areas? So I encourage you to talk to your kids and listen about just these different areas. And then I was asked to also give a little talk to our youth, our Dine youth that are out there who are hopefully watching. And I didn't really know what to say in this area, but as we've just talked about trafficking, we've just learned a lot of different information about what human trafficking is in its most tedious form. I wanted you all youth to know that you can be a part of this, and that we need you. It really breaks my heart to see a lot of youth, my peers, not wanting to talk about these things, and not wanting to educate others about things like human trafficking. It's important. Me as a male, you don't really see boys talking about trafficking, talking about sex trafficking, labor trafficking ever. And that's not just for the Navajo Nation, that's for everywhere. Since I started taking classes about human trafficking, I've found probably 90% of my classrooms, I'm the only boy in the room talking about commercial sex exploitation of children, talking about human trafficking prevention, ethics in trafficking. Like I'm usually the only male there. And to all my guys out there, we need you to talk about this, because you do have a voice. To all the Diné youth, boy, girl, however you identify, we need you in this fight. against fighting human trafficking, and it's not going to end until we all agree to not participate in trafficking, until we agree to check up on each other and really engage with one another. One of my first encounters of human trafficking, I went to a youth conference when I was in high school that was being led by some of the different high schools in the area. And I remember a presenter talking to us about human trafficking in tribal nations. And she had said that she worked in a case where human trafficking was present in a rural area, in a rural reservation. And what had happened is a girl was actually not, she was being sex trafficked, but it wasn't by, a boyfriend or anything like that. It was by her grandparents. And she was being sex trafficked for essential needs, food, firewood, and different amenities like that, just to survive the winter. And it's happening to our classmates, and it's happening to, could potentially be happening to anybody around us. So I want you to be empowered today to know that you can be a part of this fight just by checking up on your friends, by making sure everybody's okay, by asking these hard questions of really just learning who each we are together one on one. And I encourage you that you can be doing this too. You can be on here. You can be doing presentations like this because it's hard. I can't be doing all of these by myself. So I need you. Your communities need you. I think of myself as an older brother, as an uncle, and just about my family. And we need you is all I can say. I need you to be in this fight so that I'm not being burned out talking about this every single year, every single presentation. We need more of you to talk about these different topics and to talk about um, the different things that fall under human trafficking, mental wellness and substance usage disorders and different things like that. So I really want to empower you to do what you want to do with your life, but to make sure that you are taking care of each other. Um, I serve here at Vanguard University of Southern California as the student body president, which is a very big accomplishment. So um, I want you to understand that you can do anything if you just put your mind and your heart to it and you want to do it. I ran for this position to seek out change and to seek out bringing awareness of different things like this. And you can do that too, and wherever you land. If you're in college or if you're thinking about going to college, if you're in high school, you can be the change wherever you want it to be. And just know that me personally will support you. Every single youth, every single person out there, I just want you to continue on to seek just a better world for us, because we are an answered prayer. And I wanted to leave you all with knowing just the simple fact that you are an answered prayer from your ancestors, from your grandmas, your grandpas, the people before us, and we owe it to them to protect our siblings, our nieces, our nephews, our sisters and our brothers, and everybody around this world who are being trafficked. We are here for a reason, and we are here to honor those who have gone before us. So I leave you with that, my encouragement for our Diné youth. So ending this presentation, some other things you can do is see it and report it. So the National Human Trafficking Hotline is listed here. Oh, it looks like I left out an 8 there. Sorry about that. But you can call 1-888-37-888. So sorry I left out an 8 there. That will be corrected when I do the slide again. But 1-888, so 3 8s, 37, 37, and then 3 8s, 888. Or text Be Free to 233-733. So with that, also, I wanted to let you all know a little bit of insider of what's happening this year. So in May 2022, which is this year, this May, I'm going to be coming back and doing a Ensure Justice conference in partnership with the Office of First Lady and Second Lady. So this will be a conference addressing human trafficking. So if you want to learn more in depth about what human trafficking is, identifying signs, we're going to have a lot of great speakers and presenters there talking about sexual exploitation, labor trafficking, and how it relates to us and how to protect ourselves, how to protect our kids. Learning different signs and different things that you should be aware of too when talking about human trafficking. So Ensure Justice, look out for the information. I'm sure it'll be posted somewhere on the interweb coming May of 2022. And I'm really, really excited, and I hope you all can be there to join us. So it's going to be a great partnership with the First Lady and Second Lady's office, as well as with the Global Center for Women and Justice. So yeah, so there's my presentation, and I wanted to thank you all for joining me on this morning, wherever you may be at. Go out and be the change in the world. I get a lot to you all for being here and listening to my presentation. Here's my contact information, matthew.holgate@vanguard.edu. So you can email me if you want to, or you can find me on my social media platform, Instagram @Navajo Matt, and contact me that way. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and enjoy your day. Please wear a mask, wash your hands wherever you go, and just be respectful of others around you. So yeah, have a good one.